The room went silent the moment his shoes touched the marble floor. 300 guests, crystal chandeliers, a wedding cake that cost more than most people's cars. And in the middle of it all, a woman in a faded blue shawl sat alone at a small table beside the kitchen door, her hands folded tightly in her lap, trying to disappear into the noise around her. Nobody noticed her. Nobody, until the most powerful man in the city walked straight past the bride, past the groom, past every important guest in that hall, and stopped in front of her. He didn't say a word at first. He just looked at her and then, slowly, he bowed his head. The bride's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. The groom's face went pale. And the old woman, the one they had pushed to the corner table like she didn't belong there, looked up in confusion. "Do you remember me?" the man asked quietly. She shook her head, embarrassed, unsure why a stranger in a designer suit was speaking to her like she mattered. But he remembered her, every single detail. And what he said next would change everything the bride thought she understood about status, money, and who really deserves to sit at the head table. If stories like this move you, the quiet ones, the ones about dignity and being seen, hit that like button and subscribe. Because somewhere out there, someone needs the reminder that kindness is never wasted, even when no one's watching. 30 years earlier, that same woman was just a widow with $200 and a dream that made no sense to anyone. Her name was Meherun. She sold vegetables from a wooden cart on a cracked side street. Her son, Adil, was 7 years old and wore shoes 2 sizes too big, stuffed with newspapers so they'd fit. Every evening after the market closed, Meherun counted coins under a street lamp. She wasn't just feeding her son. She was saving for something bigger, something she never told anyone about. One rainy night, a young man collapsed near her cart. He was sick, feverish, and clearly hadn't eaten in days. Most people stepped around him. Meherun didn't. She carried him to her one-room home on her own back. She fed him her son's dinner. She gave him the only blanket in the house and slept on the floor herself that night. His name was Rayan, and when he finally recovered, he told her his secret. He had an idea for a business, a real one. But no one would lend money to a stranger with torn clothes and no family name. Meherun didn't hesitate. She handed him every coin she had saved for 3 years, $200. Everything. "Pay me back when you can," she told him, "or don't. Just don't forget the people who helped you get there." Rayan never forgot. He built that idea into something enormous, a hotel chain. Then a real estate empire. Then this very venue, the one hosting tonight's wedding, the crown jewel of his entire company. Meherun, meanwhile, raised her son alone, worked her hands raw, and never once mentioned the young man she'd helped decades ago. She didn't do it to be repaid. She did it because it was right. Adil grew up, became a respected but modest engineer, and eventually married a woman named Sana. Beautiful, ambitious, and deeply concerned with appearances. Sana had grown up comparing herself to wealthier cousins, always feeling one step behind. When she finally got the wedding of her dreams, she was determined that nothing would remind her guests where she came from, including, apparently, her new mother-in-law. "She'll be more comfortable near the kitchen," Sana had told the wedding planner that morning, forcing a smile. Less overwhelming for her. Adil had wanted to protest. He'd opened his mouth to say something. But 300 important guests were arriving in an hour, and Sana's eyes carried a warning he'd learned not to challenge. So Meherun sat at the small table by the kitchen, in her simple blue shawl, while unfamiliar faces in designer clothes swirled around her like she was invisible. She didn't complain. She never did. But there was a quiet sadness in the way she smoothed the tablecloth in front of her, again and again, like she was trying to convince herself it didn't hurt. She had no idea that the man walking through the front doors of this very venue, the one everyone had been waiting to catch a glimpse of all evening, was about to recognize her before he recognized anyone else in the room. Rayan stood in front of her. And for a moment, 30 years disappeared. "You don't remember me," he said again, softer this time. "But I remember everything. The blanket, the dinner you gave me instead of your own son, the $200 that started all of this." He gestured around the hall. The chandeliers, the marble floors, the entire empire built on the foundation of one stranger's kindness. "None of this exists without you," he said. "I built my first hotel with your money, Meharoon. I named my first company after the street where you found me. And I have spent 30 years hoping I'd get the chance to say thank you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones came out. The bride's mother-in-law, the woman who had been seated by the kitchen like an afterthought, was the reason this billionaire existed at all. Sana's face drained of color. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand. Rayen turned, slowly, and looked directly at the head table. At Sana. At the seating chart she had so carefully designed to hide the woman she considered beneath her guests. "Where is she supposed to be sitting?" he asked, his voice calm but unmistakably firm. Nobody answered. The silence in the room was heavier than any words could have been. "Bring a chair," Rayan said to the staff. "Right here. Next to me." At the front, 2 staff members rushed forward. Meharon opened her mouth to protest, to say she was fine where she was, that she didn't need any fuss. But Rayan knelt beside her chair and took her weathered hand in both of his. "Get up," he said gently. "You have never once in your life needed to sit in the back. Tonight of all nights, you sit in the front." The room erupted in applause. Not polite, obligatory clapping. Real, overwhelmed applause, the kind that comes from watching something true finally being set right. Sana stood frozen, watching her carefully curated wedding unravel into something she never planned for. A night where humility outshined every diamond in the room. Adil walked to his mother's side, his eyes wet, his voice breaking as he apologized in front of everyone for a decision he should have never allowed. He didn't try to defend himself. He simply said, "I'm sorry, Ma. I let fear decide instead of love. That won't happen again." Later that night, after most of the guests had gone home still talking about what they'd witnessed, Sana found Meharoon sitting quietly near the garden, away from the noise. She sat down beside her, unsure of what to say. For the first time all day, she wasn't thinking about how things looked. She was thinking about how she'd made another human being feel. "I'm sorry," Sana said quietly. "I was so afraid of what people would think of me, I forgot to think about what I was doing to you." Meharoon looked at her, not with anger, but with a tired kind of understanding. "Status fades, Beta," she said. "Money moves from hand to hand. But how you make someone feel, especially someone who can't do anything for you in return, that's the only thing that tells the truth about who you really are." Sana didn't have a response for that. She just nodded, and for the first time since the wedding planning began, she let herself cry. In the months that followed, something shifted. Sana started visiting Meheran on her own, without a deal, without an audience. She learned to sit with her, to listen to her stories, to see her not as an embarrassment to manage, but as a woman who had lived a life worth respecting. The following year, at their first wedding anniversary, Sana made sure of one thing herself. Meheran sat at the head of the table. Not because a billionaire demanded it, because her daughter-in-law finally understood that she deserved it all along. If this story reminded you that real worth has nothing to do with money, comment, get up. If you believe kindness always finds its way back around. And if there's someone in your life who was overlooked when they shouldn't have been, this might be the moment to change that. Because in the end, the people who never asked for anything are often the ones who deserve everything.